The BMF journey reached its destination, and in the end, Jorge Masvidal reigned supreme with some controversy. Hello, everyone. My name is Danny Segura, and welcome to MMA Fighting's UFC 244 post-fight show. Joining me to break down all the action and all the storylines leaving the event is Jose Youngs from MMAfighting.com. Jose, right at the top, I said some controversy. We know what happened. Jorge Masvidal got the BMF title, defeating Nate Diaz, not via TKO, not via submission, not via decision, but via doctor stoppage. Right off the bat, did you agree with the stoppage?
Well, it was a TKO. Is the doctor stoppage is
Right.
technically the TKO.
You know what I mean.
Yeah,
Don't get smart on
I
me.
know what you mean, but our audience might not know what you mean. I'm trying to save you some grief. Can't really say if I agree with it or not. I didn't get to see the cut up close. I think if it was anyone else besides Nate Diaz, maybe we would see we would agree with the stoppage. But it is Nate. He gets cut open a lot. He himself says, I think his exact words were, "You breathe on me and I bleed." But he also said, "Blood don't hurt," which is now my favorite saying in the history of mixed martial arts. So it's hard to say. Simply because it is Nate Diaz, and we've seen him go through a lot of damage and keep fighting. I mean, he had that same cut wide open against Anthony Pettis, and he fought and won. He had that same cut against Conor McGregor, and he fought through it. Won the first one, and a lot of people think he won the second one. I know he lost fair and square, but a lot of people think he won. So I can't say if I agree with it or not because I didn't see the cut up close. I get why they stopped it. But if it was anyone other than Nate Diaz, and if it was anything else besides this fight, I don't think we'd be having this conversation about controversy.
I think, the biggest argument that we've seen on Twitter, we've seen online, and what people are saying is we've seen worse, right?
Way worse.
We know the New York State Athletic Commission has sometimes been a little tight with certain things. Do you think this fight would have continued if it would have gone down elsewhere?
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question, a difficult one to answer. I think Michael Chandler, former Bellator champion, said when he fought Brett Primus in Madison Square Garden, he tweeted it was that same doctor that told him he broke his leg when it was really like some nerve damage or something, or like a rolled ankle. So this state, this city, this arena, and this doctor have already been tied to a controversial ending with another championship in another promotion. So it's an interesting question. New York has historically had very wonky situations happen with them. Where, like, remember the Gegard Mousasi, Chris Weidman had like a weird finish. UFC 230 had like a lot of weird things happening on that. And Jorge Masvidal alluded to, but didn't say exactly what was going on. So it's an interesting topic of debate. I'm honestly not know. I don't know. Perplexing question.
Yeah. So leaving the fight, a lot of people are saying on Twitter, let's book the rematch. Yeah. Let's make it happen. Nate Diaz said it. He wants the rematch more than anything. Masvidal wants the rematch as well. The only person that seems that doesn't want the rematch is UFC President Dana White. He's not really all that into it. What do you think should happen next? Do you think an immediate rematch should be booked? Is that the move?
I mean, I like that fight. Whether, like they both said it themselves, whether it's 5 people or 50,000 people, they want that fight. So if they want it, the fans want it. All the celebrities there wanted it. The only person that doesn't want it is Dana White, and for the life of me, I don't get it. I mean, Nate Diaz moves the needle. Jorge Masvidal clearly moves the needle. There's no... The ending was controversial because of who they were, where they were, what was at stake. It was for the BMF belt. BMF belts aren't decided by a doctor. They're decided when the other person is unconscious. That's what Jorge Masvidal said. He wants to turn the off button. Nate Diaz says, "You got to kill me in there to finish me." That didn't happen. This, like you said it. It wasn't a ref that stopped it. It wasn't the judges that made the decision. It was a doctor that came in and determined Nate Diaz couldn't fight. Nate Diaz wanted to keep fighting. So because it was for the BMF belt and because of everything that went into this, I would really like to see the rematch. I know Jorge Masvidal said he's down because he's a competitor and he doesn't want to leave any question there. He doesn't. What did he say? He doesn't want someone to like trip over a pebble and then that's why he won. He wants to prove why he is the best. He is the BMF champion of the world. But he also seemed to be open for business, where he wants to make the most money, and that's what I want. If Nate Diaz makes him the most money, run that fight through. If Conor McGregor makes him the most money, and Dana White decides he wants that fight, book that fight. If Colby Covington's going to make the most money, run that fight. Jorge Masvidal needs to get paid, so that's the fight I want. If that's Nate Diaz, then so be it.
But you don't have any preference on what should happen next? I mean, it seems that Masvidal was dominating the fight with
absolutely
against
was.
Nick Diaz. I mean, I had the second round scored at 10-8
Yeah.
for Masvidal. Is that the next move? Because we also know a fight with Conor McGregor would have caused a lot of interest. Also, the next pay-per-view, UFC 245, the welterweight title will be contested between champ Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. That could potentially be a fight, whoever wins that, right, for Jorge Masvidal. What do you think is best for him next?
I think the rematch would do well for him financially, and it would do well for his legacy. I mean, he himself said Nate Diaz is the type of fighter that he can get up for, that'll get him in camp, that'll make him go that extra mile. So if we're looking at making money and getting the best Jorge Masvidal out of an opponent, I think it's Nate Diaz. I think the fans really want that. I mean, I was sitting cage side, you were back here, and you said the vibe was a little funky after the fight. The fans were not happy in the octagon. They were chanting a lot of words that I'm not going to say on air. Some people behind me were about to throw bottles into the octagon, and a security guard snatched them up. So they were not.
Looks like it's not only a Mexico thing.
That's what I was about to say. It wasn't nearly as bad. Wasn't nearly as bad as the Mexico card, but it got real close. I mean, Nate Diaz himself said, "I brought the president out here. The Rock was here. It was for the BMF Championship of the World." So I like that rematch simply because there's also like these two don't need to fight for the real belt to make it a big deal. Like Nate Diaz can fight anybody and it'll be a big deal. Jorge Masvidal can fight anybody and it'll be a big deal. Yeah, they should fight for the championship at some point, but they don't need to. So run it back. If in my mind, probably in the summer, was after both of them heal up.
You would see that long of a layoff till next summer.
I would say so. Jorge Masvidal said his hands were really messed up, and he didn't want to fight in the rest of 2019, and then they gave him the best offer of his life. He said so. He said, "Let's do it," and he really needs to heal his hands up. Nate Diaz injured his knee. He wasn't allowed to do cardio, so he couldn't rely on that in the fight. He needs to get that healed up. He didn't want this quick of a turnaround from August to November. He wanted more time off, and they threw him back in there, similar to when they rematched him with Conor. So both of these guys are dealing with some injuries. Booked for maybe International Fight Week, maybe another August card, whenever. But this fight has to happen, whether it's next. That remains to be seen, but they will fight again down the road at some point. It's just a matter of when and where.
I agree with you. I think maybe next is not the answer, but at some point it is the answer. I think, we saw a great fight there tonight, and we saw it didn't really scratch the itch. There was that finish that did not really satisfy the fans. I don't think it satisfied not even the competitors. So hopefully we see that down the line, whether it's next or not, we will find out. Just real quickly, this whole BMF experience is novelty. It's all very new. I mean, this is the first time ever there's actually a belt on the line that's not the undisputed world title. The presentation, the Rock, the fight, everything that went into it. Now, digesting everything. How would you sum up this experience? Was this a success?
Success. I think the fight week was a success. I mean, the president was here. Roberto Duran was here. The Rock was here. So it was clearly a success in bringing attention to the sport. I mean, something we're not even talking about is the Canelo-Kovalev fight. Canelo is the biggest star in boxing. And they held that fight until after UFC 244, after UFC 240 finished, and showed UFC 244 on the big screen inside the MGM Grand. So boxing went on pause for this fight and then finished after it so it wouldn't have to go neck and neck with the UFC. So, yes, it was a success in terms of that. The only negative thing I can say about this week was the ending of the main event. I think you said it perfectly. Didn't scratch the itch that we were really waiting for, and there's too many questions left unanswered in terms of an actual competition.
All right, now let's move on to the co-main event of the card. Darren Till defeating Kelvin Gastelum via split decision. First of all, what do you think of the decision? There was two 30-27s for both fighters, which is always a weird thing to see on the cards. Did you think ultimately the right person won the fight?
I don't think there was controversy. I do not every close fight has to be controversial. I think that was something similar we said on the live chat for the official weigh-ins. I don't think it was a robbery. If they had given it to Kelvin, I would have had no issue with that. But they gave it to Darren Till, and I also have no issue with that. It is weird that the loser has a 30-27 scorecard. I don't think Kelvin won all three whatsoever. If anything, he had a 29-28. But I don't have an issue with Darren Till winning. It wasn't the greatest fight for either man. Darren Till was injured. Kelvin Gastelum laid an egg similar to he's done before, against the Neil Magny's in that Neil Magny fight he had back in the day. So. I can't say whether the correct man won. It is what it is.
Now, I think the media, the fans, a lot of people that were skeptical about this matchup have to eat their words. I mean, we clearly underestimated there until he went in there, had a performance against a good, really good performance against a top middleweight, and I think we might have made a little bit too much about his losses, right? And maybe we didn't trust his skill set a whole lot. Do you agree with that sentiment? Do you feel like ultimately this was the right choice? I mean, he did win the fight and defeated a top middleweight.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna echo what I said on the previous show, where whether if this was the right fight or not, both men wanted the fight and they got the fight. So I think in terms, I don't think there's really a right or wrong here. They wanted it, they got it. Darren Till won, so clearly he knew he took the fight. But he also was brutally honest that he kind of tried to come up with reasons to pull out of the fight because he had an injury, the visa issues, the late flight. He got in like 48 hours before the fight was even going down. It was the most stressful week of his life. He was terrified, he said, of the magnitude of the card. He said it took him one round to even feel like he was in the fight, and he had to tell himself to get his head in the game. So that's a little more alarming than anything. The actual fight itself is Darren Till telling himself that he doesn't want to fight right now. And he was trying to come up with a reason to pull out of it, like fake an injury. And he actually did get an injury and still fought. So, but it is what it is. He won. I think a lot of people did make a lot of his on his losses, and I think you and I were talking about it on the stream for the press conference. It seems to be the narrative is what Kelvin did wrong rather than what Darren Till did right. And I think what Darren Till did today was very impressive, given the fact that he had a fight week from hell and still won. And that should be what we are talking about, not what Kelvin did wrong.
He got a big win over a former title challenger, a win over a top guy in the division. Even Dana White saying in the post-fight press conference that he has to be top 6, Darren Till. In your opinion, where does he go next? Is he now up there with the best middleweights in the world?
I would like to see him fight maybe a legitimate middleweight. I think both of us kind of view Kelvin as somewhat of a welterweight, so he's not the biggest middleweight. They looks like two welterweights fighting at 185 pounds. Like both of those guys. This fight could have happened to welterweight, and it wouldn't have been an issue. It could have been another title contender fight. I like to see him fight a real middleweight like a Derek Brunson. I know Yoel Romero's out there, but even Darren Till says, I don't want to fight Yoel Romero right now.
Who does?
Israel Adesanya, apparently. Don't give him Israel Adesanya right now because we're going to have the Tyron Woodley fight all over again. Jared Cannonier is probably just as dangerous because he's a heavyweight that's now coming down to middleweight, so he might not be there. Robert Whittaker is still there. There's a lot of interesting fights at middleweight. But I wouldn't give him one of those elite level opponents. I'd probably give him someone like a Jack Hermanson, a Derek Brunson, like one of those guys in like the 7 through 10 range.
And real quickly, what's next for Kelvin Gastelum? It feels like after that Adesanya fight, his stock was really high. Obviously, one of the best fights we've seen, one of the best title fights we've seen in UFC history. But this fight, clearly a step back. How far do you think this puts him, and where does he go next?
I mean, it's definitely going to hurt him because he lost to an unranked fighter. In terms of what's next, you could give him Robert Whittaker. They were obviously booked before. They coach opposite The Ultimate Fighter. That could be a fun fight night down the road. Anderson Silva was supposed to fight Kelvin Gastelum before he got pulled out, and then Kelvin Gastelum went and starched Michael Bisping. So, yes, it hurts his rankings, but Kelvin Gastelum is still an exciting fighter, so he'll be fine. It's just this kind of puts his title aspirations on hold for the next 12 months.
Yeah. Now we're going to switch gears and go talk about the main event of the ESPN2 preliminary card. Interesting result. We had Corey Anderson knocking out in an upset, right, against knocking out Johnny Walker. Not many people saw Corey Anderson winning, and I don't think even less people saw Corey Anderson winning that way. First of all, real quick, what are your first impressions of his performance?
Unbelievable. That is exactly what Corey Anderson needed to do. He came in with the biggest chip on his shoulder. There was a man named Hakeem Dawodu with the word mean tattooed on his chest, and he wasn't even the meanest person this week. It was Corey Anderson. He was just a ball of fire and with a chip on his shoulder, wrapped in barbed wire. Like, he was just such a prickly person all week, where he was angry. He felt people were overlooking him. He said the UFC wants me to lose. They want to feed Johnny Walker to John Jones. They're doing everything. They're stacking the chips against me. I'm taking this fight. I'm a derail the hype train, and he did exactly that. Message given, message received. Dana White said, you did your job. You did put on a fantastic performance. Lost his mind after the fight and even pushed the ref a little bit. And now we're talking. We've never talked about Corey Anderson more in our lives. after that performance, especially after his post-fight antics. And then what does he do? He apologizes. Don't apologize, man. This is the most interest we've ever had in Corey Anderson because of what you're doing, and then you apologize for it. Like, no, steer into it. Just stay the angry, bristly Corey Anderson, because that is what got you here, and that is what we're talking about. Don't apologize. You did what you had to do. Don't apologize.
At this point, it seems it's a two-horse race to get a shot at the champion, John Jones. Obviously, Corey Anderson, who just defeated Johnny Walker just hours ago, in a very impressive fashion. And then not so long ago, I believe, 2 weeks ago, last week, we had Dominic Reyes knocking out former middleweight champion Chris Weidman. Having seen both guys' performances, I know there's some recency bias, but try to stay away from that. Who do you think had the most impressive finish, and who do you think should get the next shot at John Jones?
Most impressive finish. Dominic Reyes was more cerebral than anything. It was a technical destruction of Chris Weidman, where he got him with like a pull counter and then got him with a back fist going down. So it was an interesting combination that finished it. Corey Anderson was much more like animated, violent, derailing the hype train, doing what exactly what he needed to do. So it's two different, not both knockouts, but two different knockouts and two different kind of things leading up to that. Who deserves it? It's hard to say, man. I think you could flip a coin for either man. Dominic Reyes, I believe, is ranked higher. So if you're going on rankings, it's Dominic Reyes. I think he's third or fourth. The only people above him are like Thiago Santos, Alexander Gustafsson, who's retired. Thiago Santos lost, and then I don't know, Anthony Smith, who's on the shelf and already lost to John Jones. So if you're going on rankings, Dominic Reyes. If you're going off of a resume at light heavyweight, it has to be Corey Anderson. I mean, he's beaten people ranked ahead of him in the top 5, and he hasn't gone up at all. Like, he's beating the Glover Shares, he's beating the Ilia Latifis, he's beating guys that were in the top 5, and the Jan Blachowicz, and then it doesn't get him anywhere. And now he does this against a lower-ranked guy, and now all of a sudden he might get a title shot. It just seems a little weird that's now what gets him a title shot. So it's hard to say. I think you could flip a coin. I don't have an issue with either one fight for the belt next.
Those were really the bigger storylines here in this card, but there's also a lot of little storylines that unveiled. So let's just quickly go through them real quick. Kevin Lee picked up a very huge win, probably the best knockout of his career. I mean, at the top of my head, I think that's the best knockout he scored. Definitely, he looked the best on his feet. How bad did he needed that victory? Because it seemed his back was against the wall, and even himself, he acknowledged it in his post-fight scrum.
He decapitated Gregor Gillespie in one of the best knockouts I've ever seen. He's absolutely, I don't know if his back was against the wall for the lightweight division. He was coming off that loss to Ali Quinta, goes up to welterweight, loses to Rafael Dos Anjos, drops back down, has his new head coach, finds new life. It's Madison Square Garden. He's kicking off a pay-per-view. Celebrities are in the building. The president just arrives, and he needs the performance of his life, and that's exactly what he needs to do with a violent head kick. And now I will put you on the spot. Is that the best head kick knockout since Holly Holm did it to Ronda Rousey?
I mean, I would have to sit down and kind of refresh my memory on the best head kicks I've seen, but that was a very good head kick. Yep. I mean, the Edson Barbosa Terry Edom that was probably the greatest. That's right. The greatest one. But since the Holly Holm one, possibly yes. Again, there's something I would have to look into, but it was a great knockout. And there was also some sort of a shock value to it because Kevin Lee is associated with high-level grappling, with takedowns, with wrestling. And this was his first camp since training under Firas Zahabi, and we clearly saw a difference. He is an improved fighter, and he's clearly a fighter that's making changes. So, that's good for any 27-year-old that is competing in mixed martial arts. Another storyline that happened happened in the prelims, in the UFC Fight Pass prelims. We had Jennifer Maia coming up short against Caitlin Chookagian. Yeah. I mean, real quick, it's no brainer. She's next for Valentina Shevchenko, right?
It's Dana himself said, he goes, yeah, she's getting the next.
That was an unconvincing, yeah.
I think is there anyone like Joanne Calderwood is there, but Caitlin Chookagian has the win over her. Andrew Lee's coming off a loss. Macy Barber's not there yet. Macy Barber might even drop back down to 115 to fight Paige Van Zandt. Who knows? But Caitlin Chookagian said, when I asked her, have you spoken to Dana White about what is it going to take you to get a title shot? And she said the UFC actually offered her the fight against Valentina Shevchenko on the UFC Uruguay card. and then she was getting actually married like the day before. So they then pulled Liz Carmouche from the Roxanne Modafferi fight and then slotted her instead. So Kalinske was already offered a title fight. Yeah. She takes this fight when she didn't have to. Her opponent misses weight. She stays in the fight and then just cruises to a win. Like, I think if anyone else, if there's no other, like if anyone else gets the title, it's there are no words, but it's Dana White. So, I mean, Tony Ferguson hasn't lost since like 2012 in the other title fight yet. So, nothing's out of the question, but she has to get it. There's no one else.
Yeah. I think that there's a little bit of a bitter taste leaving this card, obviously, with how it ended. But if you forget about that just for a moment, the card was fantastic. It has to be one of the best cards we've seen this year. Exciting stuff from top to bottom. I mean, from the very early prelims, we knew we were going to get something special. Real quickly, what are some performances that kind of really caught your attention?
I mean, Edmund Shabazian had another performance. He knocked out Brad Tavares. I mean, Edmund Shabazian made his debut in like 2017. It's now 2009. His professional debut in like 2017, 2016, something like that. He's already in the UFC. He's knocking out Brad Tavares, who made his debut like 10 years before Edmund Shabazian. Edmund Shabazian now wants to be the youngest champion in UFC history. I think he has 1 year and 8 months. Yes, that is what he said. He knows exactly how long he has.
But he doesn't want to rush things. Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic.
So he wants to fight for the belt in 1 year and 8 months, but he doesn't want to rush things regardless. There's a lot of interesting storylines. The Khalid Chikagian one was big. Keem Dawada picks another great performance. Derek Lewis Derek Lewis Blagoy Ivanov was unbelievable. I'm not going to try and pronounce his name, the individual who knocked out Andrei Arlovsky.
I'll have the honors to pronounce his name, Jairzinho, with a ridiculous amount of power. I mean, it didn't even look like he touched Andrei Arlovsky, and Andrei Arlovsky just went to bed, went straight to the ground. I believe it was just 29 seconds.
And now he wants to fight over him.
Yeah. I mean, great addition to the heavyweight division.
Yeah, it's like we've been talking about, like I think it was Anthony Johnson at the UFC Dominance MMA Media Day said there's no one in the UFC heavyweight division that really puts the fear of God into people outside of Francis, and he kind of wants to go in and become one of those guys. Jairzinho is going to be one of those guys. Yep. He has like 80-something kickboxing matches. Our cameraman Casey and I were talking, like we were both said, like he might not have a lot of MMA fights, but it's not going to be a good night for Andrei Arlovsky because this is the type of fighter that could just he has what we in the business call the touch of death. He punches you once and you go to bed. Francis Ngannou has the same thing. Sign me up for that Alistair Overeem fight. I mean, I know it's under unfortunate circumstances. Walt Harris was supposed to fight Alistair Overeem, but what is going on in his personal life with the disappearance of his stepdaughter and how she's, as of right now, she still hasn't been found. So I wish it were under better circumstances, but if Jairzinho does want to fill in on short notice, I very much like that fight. Yeah. And I just want to add, what does he wear around his neck, Danny?
A crystal.
That is right, a crystal. I had to add that because everything I do lately has to involve crystals.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so much stuff to talk about. Even Shane Burgos picking up a huge win over Makwan Amirkhani in a great performance. He just looked like a complete savage out there. So we can literally just stand here and keep talking about UFC 244 fights for 30 more minutes, but we got to wrap things up. Overall, real quickly, is this the best card of the year?
Ooh.
I mean, we've seen some great cards, but man, it was a good night.
Best card of the year, man, that's tough. That's real tough. I'd have to really sit down and think. I really liked that card in Atlanta with the 2 title fights at the end. 235 was fun. The main event was a little wonky because of the Anthony Smith, John Jones wasn't what people expected, but we saw there's a lot of big storylines coming for that. 239 was a big one. Because you had the Holly Holm knockout and the Jorge Masvidal knockout, the Jan Blachowicz knockout. Edmund Shabazian was on that card too. He beat Jack Marshman. So I have to really sit down and think. I think the only thing that really, it's up there. The only thing not putting it over the top is that finish. UFC 238 was great too. That was the Marlon Henry Cejudo one. It had a lot of interesting storylines coming down. So it's up there. It could be if the main event had a non-controversial ending.
All right, well, that does it for us here in New York City, UFC 244. Great event. Thank you so much for sticking around for our coverage all week long. It was great to cover this event. It was some good stuff, a lot of fun storylines that went into this card. So it was a great event to cover. So thank you so much for tuning in to this post-fight show. Thank you for your continuous support. And make sure you keep it locked to MMAfighting.com because we will have tons of stuff leaving the event.